everybody. Welcome to another episode of Carolyn Talks Television. I'm Carolyn Topol, and my usual co-host, Rachel Arnett, is not with us today, but we have a very special co-host today, the fabulous Bobby P.
Thank you, Carol.
You're welcome. From Two Guys and a Lotta Wine is visiting us today. Unfortunately, we decided not to bring a lot of wine because I needed to stay focused, and I'm not nearly as good at that on this much wine, let alone this much wine.
Well, it's good to be here. I think it's been over a year since I was on your show last time, and there's actually maybe a little bit longer than that.
Longer, because we didn't start retaping until last month.
And a lot has changed, as you know, in the viewing habits of America and us.
And us. And in fact, today, what we're going to talk about, and hopefully some of you will be thinking about this along with us, and if you want to, when this goes up on YouTube, feel free to comment. We'll check it out. We're going to be talking about the changing viewing habits that started almost exactly 2 years ago when everything shut down, including in our own West Hartford and Connecticut. Everything shut down, and everybody sat in front of a TV at that moment wanting to know what was going on. But I will ask one quick question. Bobby?
Yes.
Okay. Asking for a friend. If I want to start re-binging The Queen's Gambit, what wine would I drink with that?
Oh, that's a good question. I have an answer for that one, I think. The Queen's Gambit, I'm going to go with, and this might surprise people, a white wine and a Pinot Grigio.
I'm in.
Yeah.
And since I'd be on my sofa, I can drink as much as I want. No driving involved.
And it's a low alcohol wine in general. It could be drunk somewhat chilled, or even it gets a little room temperature. And there's not a lot of punch to it, but it still is enjoyable to drink. And something like the Queen's Gambit, I think that's perfect. You don't need anything more than that. That's perfect.
Like I said, asking for a friend, just saying. But anyway, back to this. Now, a couple of years ago, when everything really did shut down and the world was in shock, and the United States was in shock, and right down to our community was in shock, first we focused on the news. And once we sort of got into a routine that was so peaceful, it was almost scary to open up your door because there was no sounds outside. Nobody was going anywhere. Viewing changed. The TV became literally your sole source of entertainment.
That's true. And for me specifically, and this is just my mindset and even Carrie's mindset, we fell back into comfort watching TV. Nothing that was going to give us any more stress than we were already experiencing. So we sort of fell back into a lot of shows, whether it be sitcoms or series, that either we haven't watched in a long time or we wanted to rewatch. For instance, Friends, we binge watched Friends again, we did Seinfeld, King of Queens, just as an example of some of the series, just to keep our mind in a little bit lighter place. So we tried to stay away actually from some of the more serious stuff. Even new movies that came out that were released eventually during that time frame, unless they were sort of on the lighter side, I didn't really get involved in anything too dark, deep, or even violent.
And it's interesting you say that because I know my husband and I felt the same way. The last thing we wanted to do was to go to a darker place than we kind of felt we were already in.
Yes.
I just didn't want to be in a darker mindset. So we even spent a lot of time, which amused him to no end, because this is not something he would have thought, watching Disney Plus. You know, watching those streaming shows or movies on Disney Plus. We were excited. Hamilton showed on that.
Oh, that's right, yes.
Anything that we could do that we knew we'd smile.
That's true. You needed to smile. And actually, even so, as the whole COVID thing is sort of slowly being replaced by yet other world events, but I still find my viewing habits had been, well, they were changing before COVID. I think we discussed that before. My viewing habits were changing a little bit. I wasn't going to the movies quite as much, but during the last 2.5, 3 years, it even solidified me more. So I've been very much more segmented into how I watch and the time. My time is valuable, so what I'm going to watch, how I'm going to watch it, I think has changed quite significantly over the last 3 years.
What, for example, would be, other than the sitcoms you mentioned, might be a go-to TV viewing? If it wasn't something that was a repeat, what do you think you would be focusing on?
There's actually not a lot on regular network television. I think my wife Carrie, she watches This Is Us a lot. That's still out there.
This is its last season?
It is its last season.
Like her, I also am watching the finales.
But in general, even some of the reality shows I sort of stayed away from because they've run their course. So I still enjoy the British baking show, so I'm looking for that to come back again. I find the way that a lot of the BBC programs, whether it be that show or even some of their dramas, they just tend to be a little bit more comforting to watch and not quite as graphic and over the top as a lot of American productions tend to be. At least that's my personal opinion. I enjoy more British television now than I did 3 years ago. I'll also watch a lot more Netflix, made for Netflix movies and so forth, or I think we discussed when I was on last time, The Expanse was one of my favorite sci-fi shows. Still think it's one of the best sci-fis ever done, surpassing Battlestar Galactica and Babylon 5, which was also one of my favorites. It's just a spectacular sci-fi show, and I still strongly recommend that for sci-fi people. Even if you don't like sci-fi, there's a lot going on in that show that you don't have to be a sci-fi person to enjoy.
But that's a thinking show.
It's a very good thinking show. It is a very good thinking show. And I still watch those kind of shows. I do find myself watching a lot of YouTube, though. I'll just type in history of France in medieval times, or I'll type in something that piques my interest. And sure enough, there'll be a whole either documentary or a movie or something about that particular topic, and I can get lost in that.
One of the things that I know I found, and you're saying get lost in something, is a couple of things on, for example, the HBO and HBO Max networks, which I guess are considered still cable, but streaming. There's sort of that
what is it?
gray area in between them, I guess. For example, I just watched the season finale of the first season of The Gilded Age.
Oh, yes, that is on the list.
So I just watched the season finale, and if anybody is a Downton Abbey fan or was a Downton Abbey fan, is because they have another feature film coming out in May. That would be a good parallel. That's the American. It's been, in fact, I don't know, formally advertised, but chatter advertised as the American Downton Abbey.
Yeah, I guess a lot of it takes place in Newport, one of my favorite places, right?
Very little takes place in Newport.
Oh, they really? Oh, that's surprising.
Which is interesting because The Gilded Age, there's a crossover in a couple of, about an episode and a half, but it mostly takes place in Manhattan. But it is some of the people that also were part of The Gilded Age in Newport.
Actually, they lived in Manhattan. They only went to Newport for the summer. That's right. Then they went back to Manhattan. That's right.
So it's about the days of, for the real story. They don't use this term in the show because they didn't use it about themselves, but about the robber barons and The Gilded Age, and it's really well done, and it stars. Even though they're considered and at the end, like they get that feature moment for the billing and credits, Christine Baranski and Cynthia Nixon are two of the central characters of this. Worth watching if you like that type of piece. It also takes you out of the present.
I think we all need that.
And that's what I love about it. I leave the world of today, and I can put myself in a place where people wore gowns and had balls and playing lawn tennis and all kinds of things like that. And yes, there is drama and some tough stuff that you deal with, but tough stuff for the Gilded Age, not tough stuff for 2022.
Yeah, ironically, I've had this discussion, I think just another person recently, is things really, haven't changed that much for humanity in the last 100 years. We seem to always keep falling back into the same bad habits that humanity does. So, we might be sitting in our nice, comfortable homes with all the latest technology, but people still do the same dumb things that they did 100 years ago, whether it's start wars or shoot people, and nothing really changes with humanity, does it, Carolyn? We just keep making the same mistakes over and over again.
And I kind of wish we learned from it, because there were things that I thought I would never have to experience that my parents did, and now I am. So the one good thing that we have that they didn't is something to get lost in, like TV.
True.
One of the other changes is shortly before, and I find this so ironic, probably for the year or two before COVID took hold in March of 2020, I started going to movies more. My husband and I had sort of made this commitment. As long as there was something really that was appealing to both of us, we weren't going to put it off. We're empty nesters. We'd get off our bottoms, walk out the door, and try to see at least a movie a month. And we were sticking to it as long as there was something worth seeing. I mean, there were months we missed because there was just nothing that interested us. That's a whole different thing.
That's another show right there. Not really many interesting movies coming out at a particular time.
Right. But all of a sudden, just as we were beginning to get this pattern and enjoying it, and it was date night or date afternoon, whatever it was, there was like a cutoff, a true cutoff. And when that cutoff happened, we started getting more involved in our streaming services that, interestingly enough, we'd been paying for but not using as much. And that was when we saw The Queen's Gambit, a whole lot of different series that were popping up that had been taped prior to COVID, or just finished being taped as that was starting, and then were being in production, so they were getting ready to air. So they were already done. The filming was done, so nobody was getting sick from the filming, which is when, we know Hollywood shut down for a while and such, around the world. In fact, not just Hollywood, but productions all over the world shut down. So all of a sudden, we started finding things on our TV set, and then movies tried to come back. That was the kicker. And while movies were trying to come back to the theater, the news science, the scientists on the news who were doing the research, and full disclosure, I believe the scientists, that's all. I'm a scientist believer. If the scientist and the doctor tells me this is the facts, I'm following their advice. That's whose advice I followed. I did not follow my neighbor who had a premonition. I'm following the science. So following the science, they once showed what happens in movie theaters if someone sneezes in the first row and doesn't know they have COVID. And that kept me out of a movie theater for much longer.
Well, I'll be honest with you, even before that, my wife has always been a germaphobe. So we've seen those same slow motion videos where people sneeze. So even before COVID, you can catch something in the movie theater.
Right.
For me, it was, I just got tired of, I'll be honest, getting ripped off. Movies aren't cheap. And,
no, they're not.
I always consider myself a pretty good critic of movies, and I used to go see all different types of genres. But I was just going through a string of just bad, when I say bad movies, poorly written, terrible concepts. Even the acting wasn't that great. It was one after another. When you start paying full price for that, and you factor in your popcorn, your soda, then of course you got to have dinner afterwards. You go out for a night, and if the movie stinks, it sort of ruins the dinner too. It's as you say to yourself, I just paid $15 to see a movie that was poorly written and poorly acted. It was awful. And that was getting me away from some movies. Now, a lot of it had to do with the blockbusters, because as a guy, I still like big action-packed blockbusters. Mm-hmm. And even those were garbage. I mean, they were just retreads of the same thing over and over again.
I mean, I have to say, the last thing that I would call in the neighborhood of blockbuster that I personally saw was the final Star Wars episode.
Oh, that goes back.
That was like a few years ago. And after that, I was more interested in the comedies, the dramas, which I didn't mind. I mean, I enjoyed them. Not only did I not mind, I enjoyed them. But you're right. They went from being really odd to being predictable.
It's
which
lazy.
I hate predictable.
There's a lot of laziness in Hollywood because I get it. They're gonna use the same genres that make money in the past. Constant remakes, which I cannot stand. Stop remaking movies that didn't need to be remade. The same time, and all the superhero movies or the Marvel and all those type of.
Yes.
I understand there's an audience for that, but everybody has a limit to how much you can you watch. It just gets old after a while. We haven't been challenged, and we haven't been really surprised at the movies in quite a long time.
And then when they started showing the movies, you're absolutely right. When they started showing the movies on their associated production companies' streaming networks to get viewership and get them out, just to get them out, I began to stop feeling like I needed to go back to the theater. Not only was I not missing it, but I didn't care about it. And I also didn't care about whether I saw that movie before or after the Oscars.
Yeah, that's true. The Oscars, we never had a chance to discuss this, maybe when we were together personally, but the Oscars have lost a lot of their pizzazz too. I mean, the audience continues to get smaller. It's just everything about Hollywood, the glamour just
Right.
isn't there as it used to be. I feel bad. Ever since Joan Rivers passed away, nothing's been the same is what it comes down to.
Aw.
So it's just like nothing is fun anymore. They try to make it fun, but no matter what aisle you're on politically, I'm not watching the Oscars to be lectured. I mean, you're actors. Just entertain us. You're good at what you do. Don't alienate the audience, and whether you're the left or the right. Just do what you used to do and do it good. And unfortunately, it's not what happens anymore at the Oscars. It's not really pleasant to watch over the last several years. It's just not fun.
I think part of it is, unfortunately, and possibly rightfully so, it got more politicized because they do have a platform and they've been told that they need to use it. But I still hearken, and it's not that long ago, but when Billy Crystal was doing Oscars.
Oh, God, the good old days.
And Neil, it's not that far back.
I know,
Neil
that's what's so
Patrick
sad.
Harris.
It isn't that far back. It used to be an event that everybody, even myself, who tends not to watch those kind of shows, I don't usually like award shows, but I used to watch
On
the
the
Oscars.
flip side, I'm a award show junkie.
Even when they were like 5 hours long, I'd watch it for a few hours because it was funny. They had, good stuff, and I just don't think, and it just has nothing to do with the show itself. People's attention spans just aren't what they used to. Nobody has the attention span to watch a 3-hour Oscar show anymore, really.
And I used to love the performances, and there's far fewer of those. And that was something that made me sad. Like I said, Neil Patrick Harris. He also did a wonderful show, and it wasn't that many years ago. Hugh Jackman. Once again, it made it a performance, a show to be enjoyable, and you give the awards during this enjoyable event. And that is missed. But back to what I was saying is, for example, I was seeing movies, David and I were seeing movies like Ma Rainey's Black Bottom.
I didn't see that one.
TV set. Yeah. Oh my God, we were, because at the end we thought, I had to twist his arm to sit and see it because he wasn't familiar with it or anything about it. And he sat and we watched it and he was like, wow, that was great.
I think that's one thing that, whether it's a positive or negative, I guess psychologists could argue.
Right.
If there's one thing that has changed and people are doing more now is they are watching more at home. So you're actually, if you recall, before COVID, people's viewing habits had changed drastically. People weren't watching television hardly at all. They were doing other things. Over the last 3 years, I think people actually have started watching a little bit more, but at home in the privacy of their house. So they're exposing themselves to either more streaming movies or streaming series. They're actually viewing more than they were probably 3 years ago.
I think they're viewing more, and the other thing is I think they're viewing with a quality view. And I say that because I think before you were stuck at home where you might as well watch it on the big wide screen you paid for. They're not watching it with an earpiece and a telephone on the bus going here, on the train going there.
Now, some people still are.
Well, they do that too, but this exposed people to actually also socializing with family, with your really close friends. And I think there were positives to that. I'm sad for the movies, but I'm happy for me because now, once again, I'm watching, if not first run, what we used to call second run movies.
Right.
In the comfort of my home. And I'm watching it on a big enough screen for the space I'm in that it's really quite good.
Yeah, well, I saw this coming. I've been an audiophile, big TVs person most of my life. Even before big TVs came out, I was an audiophile. So I enjoy watching movies. I've always enjoyed watching movies at home. But I think, like I said, what has really been sort of cemented in a large portions of the population now is being able to watch what you want when you watch on your own time and have access to unlimited types of genres. I mean, we had that before, but when people were home for the last 2 years, they probably opened up their little mind up here and said, well, I'm going to try watching that. I've never watched that before because I never go see that. So they expose themselves to that type of drama.
Right.
And the only negative, though, and this is another one of my pet peeves, is I cut the cable. As you know, last time I was on the show, I just cut the cable. I cut the
Right.
cord and just use streaming services. But now, and by doggone if they don't get you, when you start adding up all the little charges with the streaming,
Right.
it's really no cheaper than it was before,
It's
Kelly.
not.
It really isn't.
Yeah, Dave and I did the math actually recently, thinking about that, and we said, looks like cable stuck with us, and we're stuck with them for a while.
It's so annoying. You want to just be able to pay for things as you watch, but everything has to have that little package, no matter what you go
That's
with.
true.
No
It's
matter
true.
what you go with.
So I mean, look, whichever you choose to do, be it DirecTV, be it a series of streamings using your antenna and streaming services, however you can connect, or cable, you still get all these wonderful things. I mean, one of the things I thought about was, West Side Story, the Spielberg West Side Story that just came out, I really wanted to see, but I still was choosing not to go to the theater. I said, well, I guess this is one I'll probably be waiting 6-8 months for. And lo and behold, weeks later, it was on Disney Plus.
It came out quick, and this is another show, but it didn't get great reviews. And I'm one of those people that always has to read the reviews, and I know it was a Steven Spielberg production. And was it the controversy over the subtitles? There was some people that had a problem with that West Side Story. Was it a subtitled movie? Have you seen it yet?
No, actually, it's on my DVR right now.
It is. I don't know. There was a lot of complaints about subtitling, and I'm not sure what that meant, because it was not an option. You had to have the subtitles. Now, I could be wrong on this, but there was something about the movie that turned a lot of people off, and I thought it had something to do with subtitling, but I could be wrong.
Now, I don't recall that, because I did start watching just to make sure
Oh, so there weren't
it was
subtitles
right,
that you
and I
saw.
didn't see.
Because it didn't
any-
do great at the box office. Now, obviously, a lot of movies didn't do great at the box office, but generally, if it's got Steven Spielberg's name on it, you're expecting a little something else, or a little halfway decent production. So I'm going to keep my mind open on that one yet. I haven't seen it.
I'm going to keep my mind open. I think maybe part of it is that West Side Story is a hard story.
It is a hard story, and it goes back to what I said, regardless of whether you're a musical person or not. I mean, I'm not a big fan of musicals, but I do have a share of them that I do like, and I grew up with the classic. West Side Story, it was a classic. Even I saw that, they showed that to me when I was in school. We watched that in school. And it's hard for me to wrap my mind about remaking it. I mean, the original was good. Well, why do you need to remake it? But
And just ironically, this morning, a statement was put out. Well, it's not a statement. Steven Spielberg came out with a statement just today, and I was amused by it, that while he is going to be producing other musical projects, West Side Story, I guess that was the item on the bucket list, he will not direct another musical.
I knew there was some. I know there's a problem with the movie. You'll probably know it when you see it. Whether just the acting or the writing didn't click, or some of the actors were miscast. I know there was some issues. I just can't remember what the reviews were exactly, but people did have some problem a little bit with the.
Now, we know that TV viewing has now become the be-all, end-all entertainment. It really has. Have you gone back to live theater at all?
No. Live theater?
Live theater, not movie theater. Live theater.
No, there hasn't been anything that's really jumped up at us to see. I mean, I do like, by live theater, there's a bluegrass band that we do like that comes to some theaters occasionally, but in regards to that type of theater. But in production theater or like an acting thing, no, I haven't been into anything in quite a long time.
For my family, ironically, my husband and I, the last thing we did in Manhattan before COVID happened was we saw my brother-in-law in a show.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, no.
And the show shut down like everything else did within a week or two later, a few weeks later. And now we have gone back to the theater, partly because, in my opinion, of all the venues out there that you can get entertainment from, outside of your home, which has become, thankfully, the home is really where the heart is and the safety is, which I really respect. But live theater, truly live theater, where they show plays and
Yes.
musicals, have become the strictest on safety because they don't want it to happen twice. Not on their watch, I guess is the word I'm
But do
thinking.
you lose a little? Do you think you lose a little there?
Not at all. We've gone to the Bushnell, we've returned to our subscription, and it's been wonderful.
And actually, just twisting my memory, Carrie actually just saw a production at the Bushnell a few weeks back. I don't remember what it was, though. Whatever was playing several weeks back, she did see with a friend of hers. I can't
What
remember
the Constitution means to me.
I don't think,
My Fair Lady.
maybe it was My Fair Lady.
That was just a couple weeks ago.
Yeah, because it was only a couple weeks ago. That must have been what it was.
And it was absolutely outstanding. And we finally got the guts up. We went back to the New York theater because, once again, my brother-in-law is in a show. And we were like, but I'm telling you, you don't get in that building. You don't show your ID and your vaccine card or they say thank you, but no. And I'm not a scientist, but I do know that they've been able to successfully stay open after Omicron hit briefly.
Is that at full capacity, or they still keep it at
Full capacity.
full capacity?
Not everybody's back, though, because I go on a night that's primarily subscription people. It's a Thursday at the Bushnell. There's a lot of empty seats still sitting there. And these are people who obviously are not ready.
Yeah, like I said, there's a lot of variables. Even if they're not ready, I think people's habits have just changed. And
You're absolutely
And I don't
right.
know. Humans are very interesting. We can get used to things very quickly, and you keep people from doing things for a certain period of time, and it's tough to get them to go back to what they used to do. And you get used to doing things that you did during the COVID or the pandemic that you may have done prior to that. You say to yourself, well, do I really need to go back to that? I'm comfortable now.
And what I would say, to sort of sum things up from my point of view, if you don't mind, is I know that there's a really big level of comfort in sitting in your home, having all these wonderful options we never had before 2 years ago. But because of COVID, we now have so many more options to view. And you can sit without a mask on and know you're in your safe place and watch at your time, your comfort level, and you're already paid for it anyway.
That's true.
Yeah. And Bobby, it has been such a pleasure to have you with me today.
Oh, it's been a joy. Thank you.
And we're going to have you back again because I have a feeling this conversation is not over.
And the Dairy Girls is coming back. I just saw the previews for the new season of the Dairy Girls, so people watch that. That's another great one.
That is another great one. I absolutely agree.
That one does need subtitles, by the way. My wife's Irish, and you really got to know your Irish lingo to follow that one. So.
And on that fun note, watch the Dairy Girls. On that fun note, for myself and Bobby P,
Yes.
thanks for another episode of Carolyn Talks Television, and we'll see you next month.